The Business Minister Heather Humphreys is coming under pressure to address the Dáil over her intervention in an alleged case of animal cruelty. A Monaghan farmer with previous convictions for inflicting suffering on animals had faced fresh charges of breaching animal welfare laws. But the charges were dropped just days after Minister Humphreys delivered a letter to the Department of Agriculture about the case. Opposition politicians are calling for an investigation into the minister's actions. The farmer says he believes the case against him was dropped because of the letter. Our reporter Barry Lenihan is here with more on this. What can you tell us, Barry?
Yeah, this is a familiar tale in Irish politics. A letter from a senior politician with potential influence on a live legal matter, most often on behalf of a constituent, but often with catastrophic political consequences for those who send them. 68-year-old farmer Brian Wright of Newbliss in County Monaghan was facing charges connected to the discovery of sick and injured cattle on his farm. One cow was found lying on the ground in a distressed state, unable to walk and covered in its own dung and mud. In January 2017, he was fined almost €12,000 at Monaghan District Court after pleading guilty to charges of animal cruelty and failing to dispose of animal carcasses at his farm. In 2008, Mr. Wright was also fined for cruelty to cattle when the judge described the evidence presented as shocking and stomach-churning. But these latest charges dropped after Cavan Monaghan TD and Business Minister Heather Humphreys received a letter from a constituent about the case, believed to be from an associate of Wright's, and delivered that letter to the Department of Agriculture. John Mooney of the Sunday Times broke the story, and he's been telling me more.
Began an investigation a number of weeks ago into serious trial of animal cruelty, where we were informed that Heather Humphreys, the business minister, had delivered or sent a letter concerning a live case that was before the courts, and that the net effect of this had been to stop the prosecution from proceeding. We subsequently established that the minister delivered a letter to the Department of Agriculture about a case against a man called Brian Wright, who's one of our constituents, who was due to stand trial for serious charges of cruelty to animals. It appeared that she had delivered this, about this case, she had delivered this on January the 24th to the department, and whatever the contents of that letter were, which we haven't seen, that prompted the department to drop the charges against this man on the 29th, and he was due to stand trial the following week at Monaghan District Court.
And the letter was written by an associate of the farmer. What do we know in relation to its passage through the Department of Agriculture?
The Department of Agriculture have confirmed they received the letter that was addressed to the minister into their offices, but they're saying that it didn't go to Michael Creed's office, who is the minister, and they're saying that they didn't receive a political representation. However, what they will not say is how this letter arrived at the department or who received it. Heather Humphreys will not answer any questions in relation to this matter.
And yesterday, the farmer Brian Wright told the Sunday World how he believed Minister Humphreys' intervention may have led to him avoiding prosecution.
What is the minister saying now? A
spokesperson for Minister Humphreys confirmed that the letter was delivered to the Department of Agriculture by a member of her staff. They said as well that the minister did not give any view on or make any representations in support of the letter, and the minister had no further involvement in the matter, and any action thereafter was a matter from the Department of Agriculture, who has clearly stated that no political representations were made with regard to this case. However, opposition politicians are not one bit happy and want Minister Humphreys to come before the Dáil and provide a detailed statement, and are also calling for an investigation. First up, Social Democrats co-leader Catherine Murphy.
Well, there's a number of things. First of all, it's not at all clear whether or not the minister knew that there was a fairly substantial history of previous cruelty, and there were successful prosecutions. She needs to clarify that. And it's also something that I'm concerned about, that she was asked to deliver this letter rather than the person writing to the department with the allegations, because a minister doing that would be perhaps perceived to have more weight. And you have to be very careful about that as a public representative. It's more than an individual delivering a piece of post, if you like, you know. There's also a separation of powers that I think you've also got to be very conscious of, and there was a prosecution underway underway here. I don't know if the minister, or she must have known that, because that was essentially the content of the letter, and there was allegations being made, which appeared to be, time-wise, at least possibly the reason why this court action was halted.
And the allegations of animal cruelty here were quite serious as well.
I've seen some of the photographs in this case myself, and I would say that they're on the high end of the spectrum.
What needs to happen now?
Well, I think first of all the minister does need to make a statement about what she knew about the previous prosecutions and why she felt it was appropriate, if she knew that, to deliver this letter. But also I think the department needs to set out, what arrangements are in place where prosecution is underway, so as that there isn't a breach of the separation of powers.
And should the minister make that statement in the Dáil, and should there be an investigation into what happened here?
Well, she certainly should make that statement in the Dáil. I think that's the appropriate place for that to happen. But I do think the department, whether or not it's the minister that conducts an inquiry into this within the department about what happens, or that there is another entity that does it, I do think we need to know what happened within the department that halted this case.
Paul Murphy, TD for Dublin South West for Rise as part of Solidarity People for Profit. I think this seems to be a very serious case of an inappropriate intervention by a minister with the department. Seems quite likely that her giving this letter on behalf of Mr. Brian Wright had a material impact on the decision of the Department of Agriculture to drop the case of animal cruelty. It looks very, very inappropriate, and it clearly demands a public statement to the Dáil by the minister.
Should there be an investigation?
Yeah, I think that the first thing we should have is the minister should come before the Dáil. We're next due to meet Thursday week on the 5th of March. I think we need to now make time on that date, as well as dealing with the business of electing a Taoiseach, for a statement and then questions and answers in relation to this case, as we've done before on previous kind of controversies involving ministers. And then let's see what she says in her statement, see what she says in answer to people's questions, and then see what next steps would need to be taken.
Paul Murphy there. And Barry, you alluded earlier to the fact that this is a familiar story. Many politicians have landed in hot water down the years trying to exert influence on the legal system.
In 2014, it was Fianna Fáil's Niall Collins. He faced severe criticism after he sent a letter to a court seeking leniency for a convicted drug dealer. The same year, Fianna Fáil's Eamon O'Queeve under fire for a letter on behalf of a drug dealer who killed his associate and stored him in a freezer. In 2011, Senator David Norris withdrew from the presidential election for a time after revelations. He wrote a letter pleading clemency for his former partner, who was convicted of the statutory rape of a 15-year-old.
I deeply regret the most recent of all the controversies concerning my former partner of 25 years ago, Ezra Nawi. The fallout from his disgraceful behaviour has now spread to me and is in danger of contaminating others close to me.
In 2010, the letter writer was Green Party leader Trevor Sargent. He was at Bodder after it emerged he wrote a letter to Gardaí in relation to an alleged assault at a constituent in September 2007.
In this regard, I accept I made an error of judgment. Accordingly, I hereby tender my resignation forthwith as Minister of State for Food and Horticulture.
In 2007, Clare Minister Fianna Fáil's Tony Killeen and Fine Gael TD Pat Breen criticised for making representations seeking the early release of a child rapist. Killeen also sent a letter seeking the early release of a murderer, and the victim's mother, Nora Lynch, was upset.
And if Mr. Clean could stand in my shoes where I'm standing here today, I'll tell you, that guy would think twice about what he did, and Mr. Pat Breen as well. Now, that is all I have to say on the matter. So I'm waiting on a phone call from Dennis Donovan, my own local TD, and I'm going to ask Dennis to make representation on our behalf in the Dáil that this never happens to a victim again.
And Professor in Politics at DCU Gary Murphy has been telling me why letters and representations on legal matters are a curious feature of Irish political life, and his assessment of Minister Heather Humphreys' representation.
We have, since the foundation of the state, have been inflicted with a strange phenomenon, which is that constituents write to ministers and all sorts of weird and wonderful things and expect something to be done for them. It is a product, I think, of the PR system, the STV, the electoral system, whereby constituents think they have a personal relationship with those they might or might not vote for. What we have in this regard, it seems to me, is a clear-cut case where somebody has written on behalf of this particular farmer seeking to have influence in regard to his upcoming case, as then was. This is symptomatic of the system. I think what's happened in this case is the minister, for some reason best known to herself, has decided to pass this on to the relevant department. She had an alternative choice. In fact, she had two alternative choices. One was to ignore the letter, or two was to reply and to say that it was inappropriate for her to pass it on.
And in relation to the separation of powers between the political and the legal systems, is there perhaps a need for clear guidelines over what politicians can and can't do in terms of the legal system?
Perhaps there are. I think, although I think it would be difficult to enforce. But it seems to me what's lacking in this case is good old-fashioned political judgment. But in reality, a good old dose of common sense would have been the preferred outcome here in relation to what the minister might have done.
Professor in politics at DCU, Gary Murphy, ending Barry Lenihan's report.